I take it you all have not discussed the case according to my instructions? All right, you may call your next witness.
State calls Daniel Cole.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Would you state your name for me?
Daniel Cole,
Mr. Cole, where are you currently employed and in what capacity?
Panola County, and I am the Director of Panola County Emergency Operations.
So if anybody refers to CD1, who is CD1?
That would be me.
It'd be Civil Defense number 1.
That's correct.
And have you been a long-time fireman?
Since 1991.
And what is your role in regards to the fire departments in Panola County?
I am the Panola County Fire Coordinator.
Were you the Panola County Fire Coordinator on December the 6th of 2014?
I was.
And did you receive where were you on December 6th, 2014 at approximately 7:30?
I was at my in-laws' house on Main Street in Cortland.
And were you still there at 8 o'clock?
I was.
Shortly after 8 o'clock, did you receive a call at your in-laws' house?
I received a call on my cell phone from Panola County Dispatch requesting me to the scene of the tree farm on Main Street in Cortland, which is actually Heron Road.
And you were already at your in-laws' house on Main Street.
That is correct.
So how far were you from this tree farm?
Approximately a mile and a half.
Did you immediately respond to that area?
I did, in my personal vehicle.
While you were en route, did you understand what the call was about?
Dispatch had told me that they had found someone burned at a car fire.
And did you in fact reach that individual?
I did. I arrived on scene and found what we later discovered was Jessica Chambers.
All right. When you arrived on scene, tell me what the scene looked like.
There were, I believe there to be 2 fire trucks, maybe a personal vehicle or something. I could see a fire off in the edge of the woods, or what appeared to be from the edge of the woods from my vantage point where I pulled up and parked. There was a female with 2 firefighters rendering aid to her at the rear of the fire truck.
Did you approach the rear of the fire truck?
When I stepped out of my truck, I was called to come to the rear of the fire truck.
Who called you to come to the rear of the fire truck?
I think it was the fire chief was hollering, "Daniel, get over here."
Okay, who's the fire chief?
Cole Haley.
And he has already testified here today. When you made contact with this female individual, would you describe in detail her condition as you saw it?
She was burned. Everywhere you could see, there was a burn. Her face, her eyebrows, you could see the soot around her mouth, her nostrils. You could just see the charring, the burns that were just everywhere you could see. Hair burned back away from her head.
Did you get a good look at her face?
I did.
And what type of light were you working off of?
We were using flashlights.
Did you get a look at her mouth?
I did.
And can you describe I'm sorry.
Well, when I tried to speak to her, it was difficult. You know, it wasn't real loud, I guess is what I'm saying. And her tongue was red and swollen from what I saw.
Tongue was swollen. Her breathing, you said she wasn't breathing well. Describe her breathing to us.
As I attempted to establish who she was and what had happened, the more we talked to her, the more difficult it became for her to speak. It would get more breathy. You know, she would start out, and the more she talked, you could tell it was very difficult for her to talk and breathe. You could just see the labored breathing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Was she trying to communicate with you?
She was.
Was she having difficulty?
Obviously, I know she got, I could just see it. She got frustrated with us. We were getting frustrated with her because we couldn't figure out what we needed to figure out. And I think Cole Haley's the one that established that it was Jessica. I think we came up with Jessica. At one time, I'm going off memory, but there may have even been a Courtney at one point. It took, it's not like you walked up and had a conversation like we're having today.
Well, in regards to your attempted communication, how close to Jessica did you have to get?
Started out kneeling beside her. At one point, I actually even laid down on the ground to get close to her to try to hear, because you had not only were we having trouble hearing her, but you had the other noises on the scene, the fire trucks. You had the other first responders that were steadily showing up. You had the ambulance, the other law enforcement. You had other first responders coming with lights and sirens. You had radio traffic. You had firemen hollering back and forth at each other about what to do with the car, different things. It was just a very, very, very chaotic scene.
Chaos. Assuming it was very loud.
It was.
And as you attempted to speak to Jessica, did you get frustrated?
I did.
Did you use any other methods to try to get her to communicate with you?
I gave her a pen and paper and tried to get her to write down what she was trying to tell us. And she couldn't move. She couldn't hold the pencil or move her arms in to write.
And why was that?
It just appeared that her skin was so restrictive that she couldn't do it.
How would you describe the condition of her skin?
Of course it was red, and you could see the burns and the blistering, but it kind of reminded you of when she tried to move. It was like leather, just like stiff leather. It wouldn't give.
During the time you were on scene, all that noise was going on, correct?
Yes,
And y'all were attempting to communicate with Jessica.
that's correct.
Were there other people attempting to communicate with you?
Yes, my phone was ringing. They were calling me on the radio.
Who was trying to reach you?
Other law enforcement personnel. At one time, I communicated on the phone. I was kind of communicating with Panola 3, Barry Thompson. I made sure dispatch had notified Panola 1, Sheriff Darby, Panola 2, Chris Franklin, making sure that everybody who needed to know about the scene was aware of it.
And while communicating by phone, were you standing there next to Jessica?
No, you would have to walk away from the fire trucks and all to get away from the noise and then come back.
How far would you have to walk away to talk on the telephone?
Probably 20, 30 feet, yards, something like that. And, you'd have to walk a good ways away.
And where was the phone located to your ear while you were trying to communicate?
It wasn't on speakerphone. It was up to my ear,
So even with the phone up to your ear, you had to walk 20 or 30 yards away to communicate?
Yes.
You mentioned what type of information were you trying to determine that night?
I was asked to first establish who that was, and that was done. Then also figure out what had happened. And at this particular time, I don't even know if I asked her what happened. And maybe I did ask her what happened, and then asked her who did this to you.
And why was it important to you that you...
Based on what I saw and believed her condition to be, I didn't think that we'd ever speak to her again after she left that scene. So I was trying to obtain as much information as I could for the law enforcement.
Did you attempt to obtain an answer to the phrase, "Who did this to you"?
I did.
Was she attempting to respond to you?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, make out what you thought was a name?
I did.
And what was the name you thought you heard?
Eric.
Now, just so this jury's clear, I want you to tell them exactly how you heard the name Eric come from Jessica Chambers.
It was maybe a one-syllable word. She was, as we were talking to her, like I've stated, it was extremely breathy. It was full of air, and it was like Eric. But I got Eric out of what I heard, and that's why I put that in my quote. I put that in a quote in my report. But she had difficulty, and it wasn't like it wasn't just like, Eric, Jessica, who did this to you, Eric? That was not the case.
There's been a speech pathologist testify here to this jury today. If she were to testify that Jessica could not make out any articulate speech, what would your answer to that be?
I would agree.
That's based on what you heard that night.
Yes.
Now, did you attempt to document her injuries that night before she left that scene? When I say document, did you attempt to photograph her injuries?
I did. I took a bus-style picture of Jessica while still on the scene.
What do you mean by bus style?
Kind of like from here up.
Okay. And was there another picture taken of the condition of her body and her clothing?
It was. It was taken in I think it was taken in the back of the ambulance by one of the law enforcement officers.
And were you at the ambulance?
I was.
And can you identify both of those photographs?
I can.
Daniel, I'm going to show you a board that contains two photographs. Can you describe and identify these photographs to me?
I can.
The top photograph, what does that photograph depict?
That is a picture of the upper legs and torso of Jessica Chambers.
And what items of clothing does she have on?
Panties.
Anything else?
No.
And the bottom picture, can you describe and identify that picture for me?
Yes, that is the picture I took. That is the picture of her laying on the scene on the side of the road on Heron Road.
Is that a photograph, or both of these photographs of Jessica Chambers on December the 6th, 2014 on Heron Road?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask that this board with these two photographs be marked and received as an exhibit that's been properly identified and authenticated.
What's this, counsel?
No objection.
Being no objection, be marked and admitted.
Exhibit number 6, marked and admitted.
Your Honor, we brought out these and that, display these to the jury. Daniel, this was Jessica's condition on December 6, 2014. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How many years have you been working around fires?
Since 1991.
And had you ever seen anything like this scene?
Never.
Can you describe the attitude, or excuse me, I guess the alertness and attitude of all the people there on the scene?
That night while on the scene, of course, not knowing how, who, what, when, or where, everybody was on extremely high alert. Didn't know who did it, why they did it, didn't know if they were still around. Everybody was on a heightened sense of security, I guess, is the way I would state it.
And again, you were attempting to retrieve information,
That is correct.
and you were trying to help. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I want you to tell the jury, once again, exactly what you heard from Ms. Chambers.
Eric. And that sounded like Eric to me, and I put that in my report.
And did you in fact attempt to talk to her again when she got in the ambulance?
I did.
And just for purposes of burn victim, are you aware the temperature of the ambulance has to be kept? Or would that be something to ask them?
That would be a better question better for them.
And when you got in the ambulance, did you ask her the same question again?
I did. And I followed her in there because it was a little bit more of a controlled environment in that the noise wasn't as much noise in the ambulance. There were 2 paramedics and a EMT basic in the back. And I think the first time, I don't know if there was a deputy in there or not. It could have been a deputy in there as well. But I asked her again, who did this to you? And she said the same thing again. And I turned to everybody in the ambulance and said, did you hear that? And they all acknowledged that they did.
They heard the same sound you heard.
Yeah,
And that sound, as you testified, sounded like Eric to you.
it did.
Now, when you heard the word Eric behind the vehicle in front of the other officers, what did you immediately do?
When I heard it, I turned and said, did anybody else hear that? Did y'all hear her say Eric or Derek?
So you announced Eric to that crowd,
I did. Well, to those right there around me.
the small crowd.
That's right.
Once she was transported down by MedStat to the LZ, which tell the jury how far it is from where she was flown out that night from the scene on Heron Road.
It'd be just across the railroad tracks in Cortland. So add another 0.2 of a mile, 0.3 of a mile, so less than 2 miles. Probably closer to 1.5 miles.
And did you, at this time, you had identified who this young lady was?
We had.
And did you go to the home of her father to notify him of what had happened?
Myself and Sheriff Darby went to their house on Carlisle Road and made notification.
And when you left Carlisle Road, where did you go?
The sheriff took me back to my personal vehicle. I then went home, changed clothes, got in my county truck, and rode back to the scene to see if there was anything I could do and to make sure that they had gotten what information I had gotten on scene.
And by you being the fire coordinator, did you get all the firemen to write statements?
I did. At the request of Panola 3, Barry Thompson, he wanted reports and he wanted them ASAP. So before anybody went home, I told them, go write me a report. I need to pick up reports just as quick as I can.
And is that normal?
No,
Why is that not normal?
because no one had had time to process that scene. It was too quick, but that's what we were asked to do, so we turned over reports.
That night on the scene, I believe there's going to be a couple of firemen that testify as to what I'm going to call a suspicious person looking around. Are you aware of this?
I am.
Cortland's not very big, right?
It's 1 square mile.
My hometown's not that small, but it's still fairly small. When something happens in the middle of Cortland that calls out fire trucks, police cars, what normally happens from the citizens?
We usually get a few folks on scene wanting to know what's going on.
I believe the term that I've heard them called is rubberneckers. Is that correct?
That would be a common terminology, yes.
And did you receive a report of somebody down toward the scene that deputies or the firemen became suspicious of?
I was made aware by one of the firemen, and I don't recall exactly which one, that there was a suspicious male who had gotten turned away from the scene and had gotten in a vehicle and left, and they gave me a tag number. And once I got to where I could, I gave that tag number to dispatch. They ran it, and it was turned over to law enforcement.
So you had that tag run?
I did. I asked them to run the tag, and we turned all that over to law enforcement.
After Saturday night, as Civil Defense Director, you handle multiple areas of the county, is that correct?
That's correct.
And The following week, approximately Tuesday of that week, I believe you're aware of some items found on Monday, is that correct?
As I said, I was told they found, maybe it was some keys or something. I'm not 100% sure about that. It's been some time.
Were you asked to coordinate a search and rescue effort, or mainly a search effort, on that following Tuesday?
Yes, we were required, I don't know the exact day, but yes, we were requested. I am co-coordinator of the Panola County Search and Rescue Team, and we were requested to come out and conduct a roadside search from basically Main Street in Cortland, Heron Subdivision, and Heron Road out past the scene, and we conducted that search with members of the search and rescue team with the understanding of which they are trained to do evidence recovery, is that if they find something that they believe to be suspicious, they simply mark it and call for an investigator to come up to determine whether, or a law enforcement officer to come and decide whether that could be pertinent or could not be. But we did conduct that search on both sides of the road, approximately in some areas, like where there's in the residential area, we didn't go as far up, far off the road, but in the rural areas of that search, we conducted a search approximately 150 yards off the road on either side of the road.
And are you aware of anything of value to this investigation being found during that search?
To my knowledge, absolutely nothing was found.
Your Honor, I tell you the witness.
We'll take the exhibit down, please.
Yes, sir.
All right, you may cross.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cole.
Hey, Ms. Paul.
Back on December 6th of 2014, was your title the same, Director of Panola County Emergency Operations?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that the same as what it is now?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And what does that mean exactly? What are your duties?
My duties are, fire coordinator, which we've established already, emergency management, homeland security, E911 communications, the census every 10 years, and search and rescue.
Yes. You have a lot to do, correct?
Yes, ma'am, we are extremely busy.
Yes. And would you say that when you do a report, that for the most part you're trying to include as many details about what you witnessed as possible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I believe you indeed did a report some 12 hours after your experience there that
Yes,
evening.
ma'am.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know about the time frame, but it was around that same time.
Okay.
It was within that window, yes, ma'am.
Yes. So happened in the evening when you got there,
Yes,
a little
ma'am.
bit after 8 o'clock?
Yes,
Correct?
ma'am.
And so at least within the next 12 hours, you had drafted your report.
That is correct.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you recognize that, Mr. Cole?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. Your signature at the bottom?
It is.
Okay. And would be your recitation of what you thought or you witnessed on that evening, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, I would like to have this report admitted, marked and admitted in evidence at this time.
All right, any objection?
No, sir, Your Honor.
All right, be marked and admitted.
Exhibit number 7, marked admitted.
Before, I'd like you just to read some parts of it for me, but before we do that, I know you testified earlier that when, at some point when you went over to Miss Jessica, you kneeled beside her. You
Yes.
agree? And I believe you also said that you laid down on the ground to hear her.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that was in an effort to hear what she was saying, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to the, let's say, the third paragraph.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at this point, would have been behind the fire truck when you
Yes,
were
ma'am.
over? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. She was there when I arrived on scene.
When
That's
you
right.
got there?
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe we would have had Cole Haley there
Yes,
at that
ma'am.
point, and Jody Morris. Do you know all those individuals?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
So they were there already when you got there.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're kneeling behind the fire truck. Is that correct at this
Yes.
point? Okay. If you will, please read that third paragraph.
I then asked what happened, and Jessica responded saying, Eric set me on fire. I asked Jessica again what happened, and she stated multiple times, Eric set me on fire. I then asked what was Eric's last name, and Jessica responded, I don't know. She kind of motioned, kind of shrugged her shoulders. I did not put that in the report, but the patient had burns over the majority of her body and was in what I believe to be critical condition.
Yes. Okay. So from, in an effort to make sure that you documented in your report what she said, not only did she say Eric, she said, Eric set me on fire. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened is that you put that in your report in quotes.
Yes, ma'am.
And she stated multiple times,
Yes, ma'am.
same thing, in quotes.
Yes, ma'am.
Eric set me on fire.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, as emergency operations director, were you responsible for taking any more pictures of the scene out there?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Just basically the victim, the young lady who's out there.
I took that because I didn't know if she would be gone before any of the law enforcement arrived or not.
Yes,
I didn't know how quick they would get her out of there, and I wanted to at least have that one picture.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. If I may, let's direct your attention then to the second time that you spoke to Jessica. Let's skip the next paragraph and then go to, I then went to the ambulance.
Yes, ma'am.
If you would read that for me.
All right. I then went to the ambulance where the two ambulance personnel and firefighter paramedic Casey Austin was prepping Jessica for transport to the landing zone. And I asked her again, who did this? And she said, Eric did. He set me on fire. And I asked Eric who, and again, she shrugged her shoulders as if she didn't know. 3 medical personnel acknowledged that they heard what she said, and I exited the ambulance.
So at this point, she was in the ambulance, and you were in there with her.
Yes, ma'am.
And she was able to articulate, again, pretty much a sentence. Would you agree with that?
It wasn't like a complete sentence, no ma'am, but
Well, your quote said, Eric did, he set me on fire. At least a partial sentence.
yes, ma'am.
At what point did you try to, I believe you said you gave her a pen and paper? When did you do that?
That was when we were on the ground waiting, trying to get information from her. That was at the back of the fire truck.
Okay. And I don't believe you indicated that, though, in your report, did you?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Court's indulgence, just a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
I know Mr. Hill asked you about that you had gotten some information from some of the other firefighters on scene about there being a person out there on the scene
Yes,
that they thought was suspicious, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said you ran the tag.
Well, I called dispatch and had them run the tag. They didn't ever give it back to me. I just had them run and hold it so that we could give it to the law enforcement personnel to follow up on.
Okay. And so was that just done recently?
No, ma'am, that was done that night.
Okay. And so you had the information about the person that night?
When they got the tag, when they gave the information to the law enforcement, they had the information, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let me make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. The firefighters gave you the tag information?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you gave that to dispatch?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you did not learn that night who those persons were, who that
I
tag
didn't,
belonged
no,
to?
ma'am, but I wasn't in part of that investigation.
Okay. And so that night you gave the information, but as far as it being, the tag being run, you didn't know that?
I don't know who it came back to. I don't recall that. I mean, they may have given it back, but I don't recall. Again, that would have been something that one of the deputies or investigators would have followed up on, not me.
So to your knowledge today, you don't have, you don't know who that person would have been?
Not 100%, no, ma'am, I do not.
You talked about a search and rescue. That was done on that Tuesday?
It was done a day or two following the incident, yes, ma'am. I can't tell you for sure what day it was.
Okay. So if on Saturday is when you were out there at the scene, it would have been Sunday, Monday, Tuesday?
Yes, ma'am.
You're not sure which
That
day?
sounds correct. It could have, yeah, it could have been Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in there, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you said that who was it composed of, this search and rescue team?
It was composed of members of our local search and rescue team.
Okay. And they searched Main Street, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. Main Street in Cortland. Basically,
Where the fire department is located?
yes, ma'am. The road, it would have been like from the stop sign, really, that Wells Street and Main Street. I think that's actually where we may have started and went down and went all the way out past the scene. We actually went to the bottom of the hill past the scene where the car and all was burned and Jessica was found. And then we also did part of Heron subdivision.
Okay. So when you say we, you were out there?
Yes, ma'am. I was coordinating it. Yes,
You were
ma'am.
coordinating, okay. So this happened at, there's a railroad track
Yes,
right
ma'am.
there near where the fire department is, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Started about right there? Is that
No,
where it
It's top of
started?
the hill from there.
The top of the hill from there?
Yes, ma'am.
Which would be at the point where Main Street continues on around.
That's correct.
Correct? And meets you onto Heron Road,
That's correct.
running the same direction, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So nothing was found, though?
Not to my knowledge, no, ma'am. No, we found absolutely nothing of any value.
And so you're not trying to say that as far as the communications with Miss Jessica, that you couldn't understand anything she said? You're not saying that, correct?
I'm saying that it was difficult,
Okay.
and I put down in parentheses what I believed her to say that night.
Yes. Lastly, in your report, if you will, go to the next to the last paragraph. If you would read that for me.
At this time, D1 Edward Dixon had made scene, and I briefed him on everything Jessica had said and what I believed her condition to be.
And Edward Dixon would be with the Sheriff's Department?
Yes, ma'am, that's
Panola
correct.
County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I tend to witness, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, redirect.
Palmer asked you about when you wrote your report. I believe you and I have talked about that. Do you prefer to wait longer before you write your reports?
Yes, sir.
And why is that, just so the jury knows? You've been a first responder on numerous scenes, is that correct?
That is correct. When you arrive on a scene, and I've never been on a scene quite like that, but when you're involved in a scene that is chaotic and as many different things going on in such a short amount of time, you need what we refer to as a cooling off period to clear your head, to process the thoughts and everything that you did or didn't do. You would typically wait a minimum of 48 hours before you write a report. But we were asked to generate a report, so we did.
And I believe as CD1, you informed me if this was ever asked of you again.
You're just gonna wait.
Mr. Cole, the search and rescue, you mentioned earlier when I asked you about the search and rescue that the keys had already been located.
To my knowledge, y'all had found something which sparked an interest and wanted it searched. We didn't find any keys.
And finally, she asked you about these quotes you put in your report. You were trying to obtain information from Jessica, is that correct?
That is correct.
And I want you to go back and tell the jury one more time, what was the condition of her breathing?
The more we talked to her, the harder it was for us to understand. We would have to give her breaks in between us asking, or me asking. It was very, very hard, the more we talked to her, to understand what she was saying. I mean, she was visibly frustrated because she thought we should be able to understand what she was saying, and we couldn't. Because if we could have, I wouldn't have asked her to write it down.
What type of position was she laying in?
She was kind of laying on her, when I got there, she was kind of laying on her side. We tried to move her to her back at one point, roll her over to her back, and she couldn't tolerate it. So we rolled her back onto the side.
What do you mean she couldn't tolerate it?
Well, I mean, it was hard for her to breathe when we laid her on her back.
Also, the condition of her nose. Would you tell us that again?
Her nose was
I'm just going to object to being beyond the scope of the cross.
Your Honor, Ms. Palmer talked about these quotes. I think these conditions certainly can affect those quotes.
All right, overrule the objection. You may continue.
We'll be short. Just the condition of her nose.
I mean, it was filled full of soot, and you could see, the obvious burns around her lips and nose, which told me she had inhaled some heated air.
And I'm going to move into what you could see, the condition of her lips. I'm going to move into what's closer to the mouth, the condition of her lips.
Just restricted. I mean, you could see the black charring around her lips.
And finally, the condition of her tongue.
It was swollen. Extremely swollen.
You already agree with Dr. Higdon, but was she speaking in articulate sentences?
No, there was no sentence. I mean, it was in broken.
The name you heard, I want you to tell the jury one more time, what did you hear?
I'm just going to object to ask and answer.
All right, I think we've gone over that enough. Okay, move on, counsel.
Your Honor, no further questions from this witness.
What instructions would you give this witness?
Your Honor, he's going to be involved in the site visit, so I would ask he remain under the rule.
All right. Mr. Cole, you'll be excused, sir. You're going to remain under the rule. That is, you're not to discuss your testimony with anyone is that you may be recalled, sir. So
Yes,
with
sir.
those instructions, I'll now excuse you, sir.
Thank you.
May I call your next witness?
Brandy Davis.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involved in this case is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help me God.
What is your name?
I'm Brandy Davis.
And Brandy, are you a volunteer firefighter?
Yes, sir.
And who are you with?
Cortland Fire Department.
Okay. And I believe you also have another title, or you did back in 2014, within the Cortland Fire Department. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. EMR.
Okay. And what is an EMR?
Emergency, basically a first responder.
And did you receive a call on December 6th of 2014? I believe you called a tone out concerning a fire on Heron Road.
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the nature of the call?
It was toned out as a vehicle fire in a tree farm.
And where were you when you got the tone?
El Mariachi's Mexican restaurant here in town.
Okay. And did you in fact respond?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long did it take you to respond? Do you remember?
Not real long.
Okay. Tell the jury what you found upon your arrival there at the scene.
I pulled up on scene, got out, and I saw a young lady standing at the edge of the roadway, basically completely naked other than her panties. She had her back to me. I walked up, and there was a few other personnel around her. I asked her name. Somebody else said it. I said, I'd rather hear her say it. And she said, Jessica. And I said, Jessica what? She said, Jessica Chambers.
Did you say when you arrived she was standing up?
Yes, sir.
And where was she standing up?
Behind our engine.
Okay, behind the Cortland engine.
Yes, sir.
And when the call came out, who was there?
Jody and Seth was already on scene. I hadn't physically seen Seth at this time. He was still further up the hill. Jody approached me as I was going to her, and then, like I said, she was standing there, and we got her blanket and went to position her, lay her down and comfort her.
And where was Cole?
Really, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that he wasn't already on the scene. I'm just saying that at that particular time, I'm not real clear on his whereabouts.
What about Daniel Cole?
I remember seeing Daniel once we laid her down on the blanket, and I returned to my truck to get my turnout jacket to put over the blanket to help hold in the warmth. And then,
what I'm trying to get is you had to respond all the way from Batesville
yes, sir.
to the scene, and did Cole and Seth and Jody respond from the fire station?
Jody and Seth for sure did.
Okay.
I'm not.
So when you got to the scene, what did you ask her?
Basically asked her who did this to you.
Why'd you ask that?
As far as the EMR, I mean, there's no further treatment that I could do with what I had. And I mean, back in one of my first EMR classes, we was taught to gather information to pass on to the next chain of command.
Well, what made you think that something had happened to her require who did this to you?
Jody had come up, and he told me, he said, this is a crime scene.
Okay.
Somebody set her and her vehicle on fire.
And when you asked her who did this to you, what did she say?
Eric?
Did you ask her again?
Yes, sir.
What'd she say?
She said Eric a time or two, and then I said, baby girl, I don't know Eric. What's his last name? And it was like, it was sort of like she expected me to know him and said Eric.
Okay. Tend to the witness.
Cross.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis.
Evening.
Okay. I believe you arrived on scene that evening, as the first EMR responding.
Best of my knowledge, yes.
And I believe you just testified that based on the principles that you had been taught, it would be your decision to gather information. You gained that from your EMR classes, correct?
And that, along with comfort the patient.
Yes. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Davis, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And is your signature at the bottom of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Would it be your report or your recitation of what you recall happening on that evening?
Yes, ma'am, pretty much.
Yes. Dated December 8th? I believe it's at the top.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to have this report marked as an exhibit and admitted.
Any objection? None. You marked and admitted.
Exhibit number 8, marked and admitted. Okay. If you will, Mr. Davis, just go down about 7 lines down and start with where it says "at this time."
At this time, my patient assessment, I asked, "Baby girl, can you tell me your name?" She replied, "Jessica Chambers."
Keep going for me, please.
At this time, I knew her airway was stable and her level of consciousness. I heard radio traffic at this time. MedSat had made scene.
Now, at this point, you were very close to her. You agree with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it was your intention to get as much information from her at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would you continue for me?
At that time, I comforted her and maintained consciousness and asked, "Who did this to you?" She replied, "Eric." I then said, "Baby girl, what's Eric's last name?" She replied, "Eric." My thoughts on it was like she thought I knew who Eric was.
And just one additional sentence for me, please.
Okay. I asked again, "Baby girl, who did this?" She replied, "Eric," again.
Okay. So I see in your report that it says Eric, and you included that in quotations?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the reason for that was because that's what you heard her say, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you had seen Jessica both standing when you got there,
Yes, ma'am.
and you also saw her lying down.
Yes, ma'am.
But each time you were close enough to her to hear what she was saying.
Yes, ma'am.
I would tend to the witness, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Brandy, would you agree with me that it would probably take you from the time you got the call to get down to Heron Road, probably 15 to 20 minutes?
Normally, yes, sir. I'd agree with that.
Okay. And Cole Haley is an EMR, is he not?
To my knowledge, yes, sir.
Okay. And Cole testified that he is the one that put Jessica on the ground by himself. And he was there 2 minutes after the call came out.
As far as I know, that's correct.
Okay. And he was the one that was providing her comfort along with Daniel Cope. Because Daniel has testified that he was the one down there talking to her.
Daniel was right here at her head at one point, yes, sir.
But you didn't get there till probably 10 to 15 minutes after the call came out. And there were other people already there with her, right?
And there was other firemen and responders there. Well, firemen for sure.
And would you would you disagree with Seth, Jody, Cole, or Daniel that she was already laying on the ground?
Whenever I got there, she was standing up.
Okay. That's pretty John. He may be finally released.
Sir, you're finally excused, and you may stay in the courtroom or you may leave. What your choice. You call your next witness.
Shane Mills.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give involving this case is the truth, the whole truth, but the truth, so help you God?
Now proceed. Could you state your name, please?
Shane Mills.
Mr. Mills, are you a current member of the Cortland Fire Department?
Yes, sir.
Were you a member of the Cortland Fire Department on December the 6th of 2014?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware while you're here, did you respond to a car fire on Heron Road on the evening of December 6, 2014 around the 8 o'clock hour?
Yes, sir.
Where were you located when you responded to that call?
At the time, I believe I was center of Batesville, Highway 6 and 51.
Okay. And approximately how far is that from the scene on Heron Road, and just your guess?
Probably about 6 miles, 6, 8 miles, somewhere around there.
How many minutes do you think it'd take you? About 10 minutes?
Depends on how fast you drive.
Yes, sir, I got you. How long do you think it took to get there that night?
Maybe 8, 10 minutes, maybe.
And you heard the tone through dispatch, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When you arrived on this scene, who was there?
I believe at the time it was Jody, Seth, and Cole, to my knowledge.
You
But I
recall
can
Daniel
remember.
Cole being there?
I honestly, I can't tell you yes or no. I'm not.
I'm sorry, do you recall Daniel Cole being there that night?
Oh, yes, sir.
And how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay, you're a younger man. Did you know Jessica Chambers?
I mean, I've heard of her. You know what I'm saying? I've seen her.
When you arrived on scene, would you describe the scene as you saw it?
Well, whenever I arrived, I kind of, it's a real narrow road. So when I arrived, I kind of just parked down the hill just a little bit because it's a curve right there. And that way, if, somebody was coming, they'd see lights and kind of caution. So I parked down the hill, and I have my turnout gear, my fire gear, and my personal vehicle. So I took it out, and I walked up, and the fire truck, the engine, was parked, like this. And so I set my gear on the back of it, and I put my pants on. That's when I noticed Cole, and he was on his knees, and that's whenever I noticed, well, at the time I didn't know who it was, but I really, I figured out it was Jessica, so.
Now, could you recognize her as Jessica Chambers?
No.
And what type of position was she in?
As far as,
Was she on the ground, or was
yeah, she was laying down, yes, sir.
She wasn't standing up when you showed up?
No, sir.
I want you to describe her condition for this jury as you saw her.
Well, I mean, it's hard to describe something like that. Severely burned. Her hair was fried. And I mean, I know it's hard to say, but man, it's just how it was.
Who was actually trying to speak to her at the time?
Cole was.
Could you hear him trying to talk to her?
He was, he was talking to her, just, telling her to hang on, that we have help coming. And I kind of, he was in a kneeling position, And after I put my turnout pants on, you know, I kind of just looked and observed and kind of helped where I needed to be helped at.
And could you ever make out anything she was trying to say?
No, sir.
Was she trying to respond to Cole?
As far as I could tell.
Did you ever attempt to speak directly to her?
No, sir.
Now, I want you to describe the noise of the scene. What was there on scene?
At the time, it was the engine, the main fire truck, and there was also a brush truck. And then shortly after that, it was just people and trucks and, you know.
Did firefighters start responding in droves?
Very much so.
What about other people coming out there?
Yes. You know, it's a small community, so whenever you hear something going on, there's a lot of people that want to go check it out. You know, hey, let's go down the road and see what's going on. So then you have those people interfering. You have other firefighters coming up, you know, what can we do? You know, what needs to be done? You know,
Living our talks, what do you call those other people?
Rubberneckers.
They just being nosy?
Yes, sir.
I want you to describe for the jury the mentality you had and other firemen had out there on that scene in regards to your alertness.
We was on high alert. Reason one, whenever you looking at something like that, you don't really know exactly what's out there. You know, if somebody's out there, what, you know, you don't know.
Everybody head on a swivel, so to speak?
Very much so.
At some point, you just said you were there to help, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
At some point, did you leave Jessica and Cole?
Yes, sir.
Why did you actually walk away from Jessica and Cole?
Because, you know, whenever, you know, I was at the time I was 23, 24 years old, and, you know, that's nothing that anybody really wants to see, to be honest with you, and I definitely didn't think I'd ever see something like that, but, you know, I had to step away and get a fresh breath of air.
Is that bad?
Very bad.
Did you ever see anything like this?
No, sir.
Have you since?
The only other thing I saw was my sister.
And just so this jury knows, you later lost your sister to a car wreck, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what you did after you walked away from Jessica and Cole. Did you help any other people there?
Yeah, you know, I helped MedStat. MedStat arrived on scene, and I helped them get what they need, the stretcher and whatever, you know, if they said their medical bag or whatever they needed done. So I helped MedStat with that, and once they noted that, hey, we need to get a chopper en route, I followed MedStat to the church where we set up a landing coordinates for the helicopter, and helped them send her to the med.
Would you say that they were in a rush to get her out of there?
Very much so.
How would you categorize her condition and her situation?
I don't know how she was living.
You were standing around while Cole was trying to talk to her. Can you describe for the jury the tone of her voice, how loud she was able to speak?
Like I said, Cole was at a kneeling position, and so I was kind of standing up behind him, and I mean, I couldn't understand what she was saying.
Could you get a good look at her face? Or was Cole closer to her than you?
Yeah, he was closer to her. You know, like I said, he was in a kneeling position with his head turned. But I mean, just kind of observed her body and her hair and stuff.
So just so this jury knows, you did not attempt to directly communicate with Jessica Chambers.
No, sir.
Once you helped in all those different facets that night, were you involved any further in the death investigation of Jessica Chambers?
No, sir.
Your Honor, I tender the witness.
All right. Cross-examine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mills.
Good afternoon.
You said that once you arrived on the scene, Cole was on his knees with Miss Jessica?
He was at a kneeling position, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you say Cole, you mean Cole Haley?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you knew him to be what at that time?
Who, Cole?
Police chief, was he, fire?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Fire chief, that is. And would you describe what you were responsible for was extinguishing the fire for the most part in the car?
Well, my duties was to help wherever help needed to be done.
Okay. Primarily, though, you started with helping extinguishing the fire?
No, ma'am.
Okay. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Do you recognize your short statement there, Mr. Mills?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it's dated 12/7/14, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to have this marked as exhibit and admitted into evidence at this time.
All right. Any objection?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Be marked and admitted.
Exhibit number 9, marked in the minute.
If you will, it's pretty short. Would you read that for us?
Yes, ma'am. Station 8 was towed to a car fire on Main Street, Cortland. When I arrived, Cole Haley was with the patient. I helped extinguish the fire once Medstat arrived. I helped Medstat, then followed Medstat to church, where we met Flight 1 that was taking her to the med.
Okay. And you said that you were standing behind Cole Haley at some point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you weren't really able to hear anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I tender the witness, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Your Honor, the state has no questions. We would ask Mr. Mills be finally excused.
Mr. Mills, you're finally excused, sir. You may remain in the courtroom or you can leave. Your choice, sir. Yes, sir. I'm going to give you another 10-minute break. State's got some more witnesses, and they just need a little time to get them organized. So I'm going to put you back in the witness room just for about 10 minutes, and I'll send for you. Thank you.